All right, so hello and welcome everybody to our information session on writing Foundry user proposals. My name is Lori Chong and I am the Director of External Relations for the Foundry. I know you got your invitation from Shannon Siston, our user program director, but she has unfortunately been called away by a family emergency. Everything is fine, but there's a sick child who needs to be taken care of. So I'll be taking over for today. So joining me through this session are Emery Chan, Hope Ishii, Sumanjit Kaur, Bezad Rad, and Ricardo Ruiz, and I will give them a more thorough introduction a bit later, but you'll be hearing from them later. And now let's just get started. So I assume that many of you do already have some familiarity with the Molecular Foundry, but just in case you don't, the Foundry is one of 5 centers supported by the Department of Energy, funded for nanoscale science research. We're a knowledge-based user facility that provides state-of-the-art expertise, methods, and instrumentation to users free of charge. And so you can see on the bottom of your screen just a slight or a few examples of what we offer and the types of science that we do here. More specifically, we have 7 facilities that are dedicated to different areas of research. So we have 3 of our floors dedicated to synthesis of different types. So inorganic nanostructures, biological and organic materials as well. Once you've made something, you want to understand its properties and what it might be good for. So we have 2 facilities dedicated to characterization. We have the National Center for Electron Microscopy, which houses 2 of the most powerful electron microscopes in the world. And our imaging floor hosts an entire floor of different microscopes, laser systems, etc., for figuring out materials properties. If you're interested in fabricating devices, we have a clean room space in our nanofabrication facility. And then finally, we have our theory facility, which we say ties everything together because these folks are asking the why and the how questions, and they're figuring out answers to those questions as well. And so across all of these floors, we generate a great deal of scientific impact. In fiscal year 2021, where the fiscal year runs from October through the end of September of the following year, we worked with 650-ish users, which is pretty significant considering the limitations presented by the pandemic. Those users came from 22 states, 21 countries, representing a good amount of industry, just under 10%, where we had 131 different types of institutions as well. And so all of those numbers culminate to about 600 different projects. So you could consider those different proposals that came to us, resulting in 375 publications, where a great number of those are high impact. And then to top it all off, the Foundry is not the only user facility at Berkeley Lab. We have other facilities, user facilities, and then just other scientific divisions at Berkeley Lab that can be available to users. And about 18% of our users take advantage of these resources. So researchers from around the globe, no matter what your affiliation, can come to make use of our resources through our user program. The hallmarks of this program is that we try to have a fair and transparent user proposal process, specifically the review process, and we want to minimize barriers to user access, as well as being responsive to user needs and demands. And so just to give you an overview of our user program, we have 2 proposal calls per year. Our spring call just started just a few days ago and will go through the end of this month. This proposal is relatively short. It's about 3 pages. That's NSF style. Well, not NSF style. The review is NFS. This is fun. It must be Friday. NSF style, where we have an external board of reviewers for each of our 7 facilities. And so they're looking at the proposals for scientific merit. And then they rank those proposals. Given that ranking, our facility staff will then say, okay, this is how much capacity we have. And so we can't change the order of the ranking from the review board, but we can draw a line to say like, okay, we have capacity for 50 more proposals in this facility this year. And so anyone above the line will get accepted. Once accepted, you get up to 1 year of access to our facility. So that's to our staff, that's to our equipment, but it's also for using a desk. It's for using our conference room space. It's basic consumables like gloves, chemicals, etc. Once you get to the end of that year, you can actually apply for what's called a follow-on proposal to get additional time. The main difference here is that you have to demonstrate continued need for the Foundry. As I mentioned previously, all of this is free, and that is assuming that it is intended for publication and it's non-proprietary research. If you want to keep everything that you're working on secret and still use the Foundry, it is possible, but there is a recharge for using our facilities. Just to touch briefly on intellectual property, what it all boils down to is all IP is owned by the inventor. If you come to us with something you've already made and you want to characterize it, that is yours. If you come here to try to develop a new method and you end up inventing something new, then it would be shared. All right, so once that's an overview of how our user program operates. To submit a proposal, you go through the following process. You'd submit your proposal, then it would go through a series of reviews, first by our administrative staff and then by our scientific staff to make sure that the proposal is feasible. Next, it will go through a set of reviews by our external review board. First, they do a preliminary review where each individual reviewer will read and kind of assess the various proposals, and then each member of the review board meets either on-site or hybrid virtual. Well, this year, I believe we're trying to do hybrid, but previously for the last several reviews, it's been virtual, where the members of the board will get together and discuss each proposal and then determine its ranking. As I mentioned just a bit ago, those rankings go to our facility directors where they discuss what our capacity is for new proposals, and then they draw a line. Proposals above the line get approved. Next, it will go through another series of reviews, primarily based on safety. What are the concerns we have? Say, if you're going to be working with hazardous chemicals, what other safety considerations do we have to be aware of before you even come on site? And that will also include a review by our safety manager. Once all of those reviews are concluded and your contract is set up between Berkeley Lab, the Foundry, and your institution, then you can start your project, come on site, and start work. I should note that one distinction between the 1 year of free access, that year doesn't start until you actually initiate the project. Because there can be up to 1 year between when your project is accepted and when you actually start. All right, during the proposal submission process, during this next month of March, while our call is open, we do encourage people to reach out to staff. Now, I do realize that some of our staff get a lot of email, and so it's hard to get in touch with them, but if you're persistent, and you can get through. And just ask them, hey, is this thing I'm thinking about, like, can we talk this through? Is this something that we can do at the Foundry? So that you have a better idea both how to scope your project appropriately and making sure that with that feasibility in mind, that what you're planning can be done at the Foundry. All right, so through all this process, we do try to maintain a diversity of users. So this is a highlight from, let's see here, spring 2021. Wait, no, submitted fall 2021. Apparently the slide title is a little bit wrong, but you can see that we have a large number of proposals, yes, coming from UC Berkeley, but also from many other places. So we've got about 11% from industry, other academic institutions, folks from overseas, and then folks even at Berkeley Lab that are not affiliated with the Foundry. This results in, well, the people that are reviewing those proposals, we try to also maintain a diversity so that the people who are reviewing the proposals aren't skewed to one side. Like they're not all from Berkeley Lab, for example. We invite reviewers from all over, as you can see, to try to keep this fair and make sure that it's an equitable process. All right, so that's a bit of background. Now, what are the proposal components? First, you have your project goals and significance, and there's a point total on each of these bullets that you can see that tells you what the rough weighting is when a reviewer is going to be assessing your proposal. So project goals and significance, your project plan and timeline, what resources you are asking for, and the relative experience that you have in relation to the work you're proposing. Now, I'm assuming that everyone can read the bullets faster than I can speak them out loud, so I'm not going to read them out loud, but we'll talk about these a little bit more as we go. All right, so the proposal criteria. From each of these main bullets, the project goals, we want to know how likely is it that your work is going to advance the field? How likely is it to produce impactful publications? From the project plan, we're mostly concerned about scope. Can you actually do what you're proposing within 1 year? Is it contributing to ongoing research at your institution? These types of things. The resources that you're requesting, are you going to be asking for a large amount of time on a very key instrument that's very popular? Or are you using several instruments over time? These are things to consider, because some of our more popular instruments, I mean, if you're asking for a huge chunk of time, that means that that instrument's not going to be available to other users. And so we can't actually accept as many proposals if we're going to accept ones that take a lot of time. And then relative expertise of the user. So how much experience do you have in this area? Are our staff going to have to devote a lot of time to training you in how to do certain techniques and so on? These are all things that we want to consider. All right, so now we're going to go through a proposal here, and oops, let me get this link 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing because I'm actually going to switch to another screen, and meanwhile, I'm going to get a Google Doc link, which is actually on the Foundry website, and I have put that in the chat if you want to bring up the original proposal. And then I'm going to take you through a few annotations of one of these examples that's available on our website. All right. This would have been way more slick if I had been able to share multiple screens at once, but today Zoom wasn't happy with PowerPoint, and that just happens. All right, so here's one of those proposals. You can open it on your own screen to see it more clearly, but just I want to point out some of these sections that are highlighted. So under project goals and significance, like just this first wording where it says a major challenge towards, this is framing the technological impact. And then as we move down, it's describing transition metal dietylcogenides. My goodness, talking is hard today. And so it's being more specific about what is it's a particular class of promising materials, and it's adding ample citations to lend credibility to what you're working on. Here in this next paragraph, it begins with a very, very clear statement of the intended work. And as we continue, we're framing what previous work has found and identifies a need for this specific proposal to advance the science. And then right after that, it specifies which staff are going to provide support or which staff member you aim to work with. And it's basically trying to marry like the resources at the Foundry with your idea. Like, why is it that the Foundry is the place that is absolutely needed for your idea? For example, like on our imaging floor, like we have a few TEMs that are fairly run-of-the-mill TEMs. So why do you need to come to the Foundry to use our TEM. This next one, as we scroll down in the figure, the images here are clear, relevant, and connected to the text. So it will actually provide support for the reviewers understanding what your goals here are. And when you discuss the need for the Foundry, this section is making a persuasive case of, again, why the Foundry is the best place for this work. Okay, as we move down to the project's plan and timeline, these black bars are because there's some information that's been redacted. You want to be sufficiently detailed and specific to make it clear that 1 year of access is appropriate for the proposed scope of work. Now, I mentioned that, yes, you can, in the future, submit a follow-on proposal, but that's not guaranteed. First, you have to take a chunk of your idea and make sure that it's actually doable within 1 year. And so you can see where it's being specific in these different paragraphs about how long you anticipate certain things to take, how long a certain person might be working on site at the Foundry. And then overall, that should roughly fit within 1 year. And then we move down to the relevant expertise segment, where you want to provide information if you have prior training on similar techniques, or if there's anyone who's a co-PI or in your research group who has expertise in a certain area and can share that amongst the research team. Okay, so that is our example proposal. If anyone has questions about that, please feel free to put them into the chat as I bring back my where did my PowerPoint disappear to? Oh, there it is. Gotta love how Zoom and PowerPoint sometimes just hate each other. They hate each other very much today. So thank you for your patience as I undertake my personal battle with technology today. Okay, so what I've just described is the Foundry sample only proposal, or not sample proposals. I've described our standard proposal. We also have a few other types of proposals, which include sample only, instrument only, and rapid access. So the first two are if you have a very specific, very small scoped need for a specific material or a specific instrument at the Foundry. And then rapid access is if you have an idea where you're trying to get, say, some preliminary data for a proposal or a very, very small need, which can be submitted at any time, not just during our proposal calls. All right. So again, that's our overview of the user program and the proposal process. Now I'm going to ask our panelists to turn their videos on. We have Dr. Emery Chan, who's a staff member in our inorganic facility, Dr. Ricardo Ruiz, who's a staff member in our nanofabrication facility, Dr. Behzad Rad, who's staff member in our biological nanostructures facility, Professor Hope Ishii, who is a professor at the University of Hawaii and is on our NSEM proposal review board, and Dr. Sumanjit Kaur, I apologize if I mispronounced your name, who is a user in our organic facility. So I'm going to ask a few questions of our panelists now. And yeah, so first we'll start off with our scientific staff. What do scientific and technical staff look for in the feasibility review? Like Emery, Behzad, Ricardo, who would like to chime in first?
Maybe I'll chime in. So one of the really important things about feasibility is not only obviously is something feasible, clearly you should check in with the staff member to make sure your idea is something that you can do at the Foundry, but mostly what we're looking for is the amount of staff effort a proposal will take, because there's only a limited amount of time for staff to help you. So if the proposal review board thinks it's going to eat up like 90% of my time, they're going to be less likely to give that proposal a good score. So anything you can do to reduce the staff effort, like say, oh, I'm very experienced in this, or I have a lot of experience in nanocrystal synthesis, or I will help to develop this capability, that really improves your score.
Ricardo, Behzad, do you have anything to add?
Sure, yeah. I would like to add a couple of things to what Emory said. In reviewing or in evaluating what a feasible idea is, we are also looking, and also the committee that's reviewing this may be looking for the process flow of your experiments and making sure that tools and materials are both available and compatible with what we have in the lab. So that's also why it's very important to check with a staff member while you're writing the proposal, so that the feasibility gets incorporated naturally, right? Because most likely the staff you consult with will be asking the right questions about what kind of materials are you going to be using or bringing to the lab, what capabilities you need, and whether all of those are available at the lab and are compatible with your specific materials. So I'm going to add to that in that same topic, right? In our case, I am in the nanofabrication facility, but this may also apply for other facilities as well, that if your proposal includes a diagram of your process flow, that helps a lot in delivering that idea very quickly. Right? Because people, either in the staff side or in the reviewer side, by looking at a cartoon or a diagram that quickly conveys the process flow, will have a good idea of what entails to complete your experiments. Laurie?
Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. Behzad, did you have anything to add to Emory and Ricardo's answers?
Yeah, and coming at it from the perspective of one of the synthesis facilities, what we also look for is whether what you're going to make, the materials you're going to make, is it feasible within the year time frame. So again, to Ricardo's point, diagrams and/or structures, and kind of having that sort of goal is really, the concrete goal is really important, because we want to be able to evaluate whether it's feasible or not. And there are times where we can kind of temper the expectation and say, that is a bit too much, or these couple of structures are possible and these aren't. But again, the more specific you are about what you want to make and how much, this is basically really key for us to understand, how much time we're going to need that particular year for the proposal.
Great, thank you all. All right, the next question for staff: what makes a good proposal from the staff perspective? And Ricardo, how about you start this time?
Maybe I can jump in.
Okay, thank you, Emory.
While Ricardo is getting online. So one of the most important sections is this need for the Foundry section. And that's because, of course, Foundry resources are limited, and, there's an unlimited demand for free. So it doesn't really matter. Well, it matters not only that your science is good, but that your science requires the Foundry, right? So if you could do your experiment at home, meaning your own lab, then there's no need for the Foundry, no matter how good your science is. And so if push comes to shove and your two proposals are the last ones to be considered, they're going to take the one that really, really needs the Foundry, right? So in that section is not really for you to say, I need UV vis and I need, 2 hours of TEM. It's more to say, like, I really need a specific instrument that isn't available nowhere else in the world, or I need this expertise that is very specific to the Foundry. And most importantly, they really love when you talk about synergies, like that your work is synergistic with efforts that are in the Foundry or LBL, or like co-localization, that you want to use multiple user facilities. Like I want to use both the ALS and the Foundry, and I have this material that's so like unstable that I really need to be able to run straight from the Foundry and measure it in the ALS. That kind of thing will push your proposal way up above the pack than just saying, I want to have free TEM.
Right, Ricardo, if you're back with us, do you want to chime in as well?
Yes, sorry, I had a bad connection a moment ago. So yeah, I agree with what Emery just said. And the only thing I could add is a clear explanation of why the Foundry is a good place for realizing your project or your idea. Given that we are a user facility that is open to the public on a competitive basis, right? We want to be able to support you users in making a difference. So a good proposal would be also one in which you are leveraging the use of the Foundry to make something that's new and unique, and that it's also taking advantage of the synergies that Emery mentioned.
Thanks, and Behzad.
Yeah, I mean, those are great responses. And, I would add that, for what I've seen is that a strong proposal is one that really kind of sticks to a workable project in the year timeframe. And a lot of people have, green applications and other things where you have 3 project names, for example, and those are just not sort of what's feasible in a year timeframe with the Foundry. So really having to think about what is it you can do here realistically, given having to travel, stay, and work at the Molecular Foundry on the West Coast. That is really important. It shows that you've thought really well about the proposal and that you can really leverage what's here for what's best for your project, and get a high impact people.
Right, great. Well, next, I would like to direct a question to our review board member present, Hope. What do PRB members look for in the proposal process? And then if you have any tips on how to address the review criteria and like what, oh my goodness, common area, problem areas are, that would be great.
So I would encourage you all to start by looking at the review criteria, because that is exactly what we look at when we look at the proposals. We go through those criteria. And so it's a really important place to start. And I think a lot of the points that the staff members have already made are directly to what's in those criteria. So that's what your proposal is going to get judged on. Start there so you have a good understanding of what goals you're trying to get to as you're writing. Let's see. I do have a couple of tips, especially for introduction. So I think it's very common for us when we get very deep into our own area of research to really kind of forget that the rest of the world doesn't do exactly what we do. So remember that the review panel is full of people from a wide range of science backgrounds, and make sure that you're speaking to a general audience, because there's so many proposals that are coming in. There's just not time for the review board to go and do research to understand the background of your work. So you really need to make sure you're speaking to a general audience and try to avoid too much jargon, so that the review board really gets why it's important that you're doing the work that you're proposing to do. Again, also mentioned before by the staff, but important to point out where you're going to take advantage of unique capabilities of the Foundry, and this co-location and synergy with other work is a good example of how you can do that. Even if you are just doing TM, for example, having the particular expertise of a staff member, for example, is a good way to emphasize that uniqueness. And then don't forget to also let people know what you're going to do at your home institution, because that really shows that you're valuing the resources at the Foundry by doing your homework at home before you get there. Let's see. I think maybe the most important thing that'll really help in proposal writing is talking to the staff. Like, go in there and call up or an email, get feedback early, and you want to get the response from them early on feasibility and whether the scope makes sense. and whether the resources you're requesting are appropriate or going to be available. And if you basically do your homework and get started early, I think you're going to have a really good outcome. I might have gotten off topic there, Laura. Apologies.
No, you did a great job, Hope. That was a very thorough answer. Thank you. Next, I want to ask our resident user, Sumanjit, do you have any advice for or tips of what you found helpful in writing a proposal to the Foundry?
I think the other panelists did a great job. They pretty much mentioned all the points. So my personal experience is that the staff, the Molecular Foundry staff, is very knowledgeable. They are really expert in their field. So whenever I write proposal, I reach out to them beforehand, and having conversation with them, not only it will refine your idea, but it will give you an idea of what other facilities in the Molecular Foundry can help you in your research. So I think the staff consultation before proposal is really important. And the one other key is that don't do it in the last week when it is due, because all the staffs are bombarded with these emails from all the different users in the last 2 days before it is due. So start early so that they can provide, and they are very open. I mean, they are ready to give virtual meetings, write a response in email. But also, if one of my proposal last year did not get accepted, but what I got was a very good feedback. And the one of the point other panelist was mentioning, the scope. The proposal was, got a good review, but it said the scope is too much. It's not feasible in 1 year. So that made me realize that I should, think about it. And then we cut down on the scope and listen to all the other feedback. And the same proposal got accepted this time in the organic facility. So I think the take-home message is that please consult the staff, and, and it will help you refine your idea. And, if you don't get accepted, don't give up. Look at the feedback and apply again. Thanks.
Great. You actually anticipated my next question to you, and you already answered it, which was how working with feedback after a proposal. So that's excellent. Thank you for your answer. Let's see here. Any of our panelists, do you feel like you have anything that hasn't been said yet, that I haven't prompted, that one of the other panelists hasn't mentioned yet, that you think would be really valuable for a prospective user before they write their proposal?
One of the things that it's important for users to realize is that each of the facilities has a slightly different way they deal with proposals. They have different things they're looking for. So just because you get advice in this session or from one staff scientist in a facility doesn't mean it automatically applies to other ones. So for example, NSIM operates very differently, and they evaluate the proposals in a different perspective than, say, a synthesis facility like the inorganic facility. We are used to really long-term projects, like where it is more exploratory, but we have to deal with, the fact that these things can go on for a long time. Whereas, NSIM, they want to know that you have experience in TM. They want to know exactly what you're trained on and what you're going to do and how you're going to analyze your data. So that's why one reason why it's really important to talk to the staff scientist or the staff members, because they know who's on the PRBs, they know what they're looking for, and it may differ from PRB to PRB.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And to add that, definitely talk to the staff member you think is going to be appropriate for when submitting your proposal, because not only can we tell you about whether the workflows and instrumentations are functioning and well maintained and going on in our facility, but we can also help with, which support facilities to add. And I think that sometimes can be confusing, because I've seen proposals where they've checked a lot of boxes, right? Oh, all these facilities, and for your project, we can really help and say, you will need these 2 instruments, which are in this facility and this facility. So please go ahead and check those boxes and request them specifically. Otherwise, I think it just seems really kind of maybe taken from the outside, like how many different facilities you can apply for. But we're here to help, and so definitely reaching out to us and asking for our advice for your project is a big plus.
Those are really great points, Emery and Behzad. And just to jump on, well, jump on one thing that I don't think has been expressly said. We've talked a lot about accessing tools, but our staff themselves should be considered equal resources that could be sought after through a proposal, like equally to an instrument, just because they are experts in their fields. And so many of our users do come here just to consult with Emery Chan, to consult with Ricardo and Behzad, et cetera, because they're just that good at what they do. So please do keep that in mind as well. And then I also have a little note from Tina McCoy, who's a user program administrator and works with a lot of our, not just a lot, but all of our users. She wants to make sure that everyone understands that it's important to have a clear timeline for the proposal that you're submitting. So you noticed in that example that I went through, when it got to the timeline section, it actually had an estimate of like, oh, this should take roughly this many months, and we expect this to take this many months. And so it does help put kind of end caps on how big a project you're talking about. And then finally, one thing that we haven't really talked about very much yet has been one of the, I guess, silver linings of the past 2 years has been the development of a lot of remote access or distance access tools. I'm putting a, oops, no, that was to a direct message. Let me try that again. Putting a link in the chat now, which is to one of our articles on the Foundry website that details more of these, but things like the microscopes at NSEM, some of those tools can actually be accessed remotely. Some of these are more safety oriented, say in our nanofabrication facility, we have means of doing remote training through augmented reality. So you can read more about these either through, well, these are featured in our podcast, Foundry from Home. Each of those podcasts has a transcript if you read faster than you listen, or you can also look at the 2 little featurette videos we have on some of our different tools. And so as you're thinking about whether or not to submit a proposal this cycle or not, if travel to the Foundry is a potential roadblock for you, either because of the cost of getting to Berkeley or because of ongoing safety concerns, please do consider asking our staff about what tools specifically, since a lot of the tools and features mentioned in those articles aren't necessarily the most up to date at this point in time, because our staff are very excellent at continuing to innovate. But to talk to our staff about what might be possible if it's less possible for you to come on site. There's a lot more that we can offer to our users who are remote than we used to be able to. And that is certainly something that's exciting. Okay, let's see here. If any of the attendees have a question, please feel free to either write it in the chat or you can raise your hand and ask it live. So yeah, feel free to do that. There was one question that came through as a direct message asking primarily about the experience aspect of the proposal, which is if a student and their advisor don't have the training on the type of characterization they intend to do we recommend finding a co-PI that has that experience on the particular instrument? Any of our staff members want to answer that question?
I can try that, even though that's probably more of a characterization facility. So if the question is, will it help your proposal if you just have someone on your proposal? Probably that's not going to be a huge factor, because if it's the graduate student that's doing all the work and they don't have experience, then it would still be pretty much as much work for the staff to train them. But if you can say something like, I have experience in my home facility doing kind of low res TM, and I just want to do more advanced TM at NSEM, that would help. Or you could say something like you are planning to go to this workshop and learn that particular skill. But ultimately, the training will factor into the staff effort. But I would say more useful would be the fact that if you have particular reasons why that to justify why you're not trained, right? If you come from a primarily undergraduate university, then they're going to cut you a little bit more slack than if you come from like UC Berkeley and you have a lot of access to TM.
Great, thank you, Emery. We just had a question come into the chat of, should proposals need to focus exclusively on the fundamental science, or is some applied science tie necessary? No, they don't need to focus on one or the other. And applied science is not necessary. Some of our work is, well, I'll just preface this by saying we are funded by the part of DOE that's called Basic Energy Sciences. So our mission fundamentally is to look at basic fundamental science. That being said, we do have a lot of people who are working on a project with a specific applied focus in mind. And so we have some of everything. See here, I'm going to ask Brandon if he wants to amend my answer at all.
No, I think you're right, Lori. Hi, everyone. I'm Brandon Bruff. I'm the Deputy Director of the Foundry. Yeah, so we are funded by the Basic Energy Sciences, which is a kind of basic science, fundamental science organization. However, as a user facility, we have a fair amount of latitude to facilitate the research of our users. And so if you have a more applied research question that could be informed by the basic science capabilities of our staff, I think that's the sweet spot. But maybe I'll kick it to Hope, but I don't think that the reviewers are going to be docking anything that is overly applied or whatever. I think the motivation is this something worth doing? And is this something worth doing at the Foundry?
Yeah, in my experience, such as it is, Brandon's absolutely right. We've seen proposals that kind of run the gamut, but of course it is. I mean, the capabilities are basic science capabilities, and so the idea is that you apply those appropriately to your problem. Actually, I just wanted to jump into the person who was asking about, like, if I'm not already an expert in this, is it worth proposing? This is where I would really strongly encourage you to call up staff and talk to them, because that's where you're going to start getting feedback, and you may develop a collaboration with a staff member who is an expert. So don't stop if you have good science and don't have the experience yet.
Great, thank you, Hope. Brandon, I have another question for you, which is, could you provide more detail about IP ownership for companies who have inventions already, but would like to understand the chemistry interactions in the Foundry facility?
Leave it to Sebnem to throw us a zinger. Good to see you again. Yeah, so basically, if you, whether you're a company or not, have existing IP that you bring to bear on your research project at the Foundry, you are not putting it in jeopardy, I think is the easiest way to say it. I think that there's, kind of building on what Hope is saying, there's a huge amount of enthusiasm from our staff to talk to folks. And I think especially for those who are coming from the more industrial side, to be able to carve out a project that is comfortable for all sides. We want to make sure that you do not feel like you're overly exposing your IP. And I think that we can get pretty creative in ways of scoping a scientific question that doesn't threaten the IP, but really does inform the next steps of a company. And we're happy to have those kind of one-on-one conversations about specifics. Does that help?
It's helpful, Brandon, but I would like to talk more about that, because as a working in company, like like legal department is asking more about the IP ownership. You know, I would love to join you again to using your facility, but this IP ownership is not super clear. Maybe I should send you an email follow up. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, to Sebnem and to anybody, if you want to get your lawyers in a room and sit down, I think Shannon is you know, getting her honorary you know, bar exam passed here almost, because she has to do so many contracts things. We're happy to sit down with you guys and kind of help you navigate it. And I know that it is kind of challenging, but we're very interested in finding a way to make it work.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Can I butt in once more? So in the process of going through proposals, there have been a couple of cases where it was unclear whether work was going to be considered proprietary or not. So I would just encourage those who have industrial work to just be very clear whether this is work that's intended for publication in the open literature or if it's going to be performed as proprietary work in your proposal.
It's a very good point, Hope. I think that sometimes something that I see from our reviewers is that they feel like they just don't have enough details to weigh in on something. And I think that it undermines a scientific case, and it also undermines the idea that this proposal has a good plan if there's not sufficient detail. So again, to your sage advice, Hope, reach out to the staff and we'll help navigate this with you.
Great. We had one other question come in through chat, which was asking about follow-on proposals, but also specifically related to a proposal that had been delayed due to COVID. And so I was going to ask Tina McCoy, who's our user program administrator, to talk a little bit about what this person should do. So Tina?
Sure. So if you have a proposal that is active now that will soon be ending, then you should submit a follow-on proposal in this call. The call will end March 31st, and that follow-on proposal will go through the proposal review board review, and it will go through, you know, whether it's accepted or rejected. And you want to make sure you can get a hold of me, and I'll help you with the dates. I need to know the dates that the project is ending, and whether you need to do the spring call or the fall call. So you want to submit a proposal in time so that you're not having a lapse in your work.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tina.
You bet.
Okay. Any last questions from anyone or any of our panelists? Think of anything else that you want to share with prospective proposal writers. Okay, well then I have a hope that this will work. Okay, yes, thank you, PowerPoint, for coming back. All right, we went through that. I just want to bring up this slide to show you the people that you can go to first for questions about the proposal process. So Tina is one, but also Shannon, Kristen, Donald, they all can answer questions about the proposal process. Or if you go through, if you're on our website perusing this section that I've just put into the chat, which is our expertise and instrumentation section, as you can look through the different PIs that we have and their specialties or the different tools that we have available. If you're not sure who to talk to about something, a good first place would be to ask, hey, Tina, like, do you know of someone like who does this type of thing? And Tina can say like, oh yeah, you want to go talk to Emery. And so please use our user program office staff as a resource as you go through this process as well. They're here to help. So finally, I just want to close with the fact that our proposal call is open through the end of this month, March 31st. We close at 11:59 Hawaiian time. So you have until the end of the day Hawaii time on the 31st to submit your proposal. And then I also want to do a save the date for our annual user meeting, which is a conference that brings together all of our users that have to talk about Foundry science and Foundry related science. It's going to be a hybrid event. At least we're planning for a hybrid event where some of the components will be on site at Berkeley Lab, and there will also be some virtual components. So please note those dates down, and we hope that you'll be able to join us then. With that, I would like to thank our panelists one more time, Emery, Behzad, Ricardo, Hope, and Sumanji, for your participation today. I know your answers will be very valuable for those that were able to attend today and those people that may be watching this as a recording later on. So thank you again for participating. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in today.